maintenance than a virgin, best at a servant, just an appendage, lip to attendance, so that he never lifts a finger.
A 40-year-old is accused of essentially walking into work yesterday at 6 a.m. and the first thing he did was grabbing a sledgehammer and then just bludgeoning 20-year-old Amber Czech.
It just shows, how fleeting life can be. This poor victim, 20 years old, went to work yesterday morning and didn't come home.
While everyone else is starting their day, one man decides, according to investigators, to turn a workplace into a killing ground because he simply didn't like her. Let that sink in. Not an argument, not a fight, not some long-running feud, just didn't like her. A young woman with her whole life ahead of her, ambitious, skilled, respected, lying on the floor of her workstation while sheriff's cruisers race into the parking lot. And the man accused of doing it? He walks away as if he's finishing a task on a checklist. It's the kind of crime that makes you angry, makes you ask, how does someone get up in the morning and decide they're going to take a life at work? What kind of person plans something this cold? This isn't random. This isn't misunderstood. According to police, this was a choice, thought about, planned, and carried out. And it leaves one question burning through the entire case. Why did a simple look, a so-called bad look, push a man to do something this cruel? Welcome to True Crime Story Videos. Every face you'll see here once had dreams, laughter, and people who loved them. But somewhere along the way their stories went silent. I'm Detective Daniel, and here we give those stories a voice again. Before we begin, take a moment. Tell me your name and where you're watching from. November 11th, 2025. The first sign that something is terribly wrong comes with a shaky 911 call. A voice rushes out the words no one expects from a small-town workplace. We have an injured female worker. Massive head trauma. Please hurry. Right away the tone changes. This isn't a slip or a fall or some routine accident. The caller sounds scared. He sounds like he's looking at something he wishes he never had to see. Within minutes, sheriff's cruisers race toward the factory. Sirens cut through the quiet morning. Officers jump out before the cars even stop moving, grabbing medical bags, rushing inside, and what they find stops them cold. A young woman, Amber Czech, lying on the floor of her own workstation. Police tape goes up around a place that should have been safe. A place where people clock in, work hard, and go home. But today it's different. Today, first responders walk into a scene that doesn't feel like a workplace at all. It feels like something much darker, and they know, instantly, this was no accident, a murder, at work, during a normal morning shift. How does something like that even happen? How does a regular Tuesday turn into a crime scene? And why would a coworker pick up a sledgehammer and kill? The questions hit fast, and no one in this small Minnesota town has answers. Not the people who work beside Amber, not the neighbors who watched her grow up, not the community that woke up expecting a normal day. Local news stations jump on the story within hours. Breaking alerts pop up on screens across Minnesota. Anchors using words people here never hear. Workplace homicide. Coworker arrested. Young woman killed on the job. Outside the factory, cameras roll as the sun rises over Cokato. The place looks quiet, too quiet for what just happened inside. Welding sparks flash through windows. Workers stand in shock, trying to understand how someone they passed in the hallway every day could do something like this. Family members, heartbroken, confused, tell reporters they can't make sense of it. Neighbors say Amber was kind, hard-working, and had a future she was excited about. And now, suddenly, she's gone. A simple shift, a normal morning, a place where people come to earn a paycheck, and somehow, it ended in murder. To understand this story, you have to know the two people at the center of it. On one side, Amber Czech, just 20 years old, a welder from Hutchinson, Minnesota. Young, talented, proud of her work, Amber showed up every day wanting to build a future. She wasn't just starting a job, she was starting a life. And then there's the man police say took that life. David Bruce Delong, 40, a coworker from Watkins. A man who walked the same factory floor as Amber, who saw her every day, and according to investigators, decided he didn't like her. Not because of a fight, not because of some long-standing feud, just didn't like her. And in his own words, police say he admitted he had been planning to kill her for some time. Planning, thinking about it, letting that idea grow into something deadly. Two people, one with everything ahead of her, and one who, investigators say, made a choice that ended it all. This is where the story begins, and it only gets darker from here. Across rural Minnesota, the mornings are usually quiet, calm, predictable. But on this day, that calm was a lie. Inside a factory that should have been safe, something dark was already set in motion, something planned long before anyone realized what was happening. This is the story of a young woman who came to work to build a future, and a coworker who, investigators say, came with something else in mind, planned in plain sight: the sledgehammer murder of Amber Czech. Here's what stands out: the facts that shook a small town awake. The location: advanced process technologies in Cokato, Minnesota, a place where people go to earn a paycheck, not fear for their lives. The date: November 11th, 2025, a morning that should have started like any other. The weapon: a sledgehammer from inside the factory, a tool meant for building, turned into something deadly. And the charge: second-degree intentional murder, with prosecutors weighing whether to push it to first degree. Because this wasn't random. According to investigators, it was planned. One day, one shift, one decision that changed everything for everyone who knew Amber. Before her name appeared in headlines, before a small town woke up to the worst news imaginable, Amber Czech was simply Amber, a Minnesota kid, growing up in quiet neighborhoods, surrounded by fields, friends, and family who loved her. People remember her as outgoing, the kind of girl who smiled first, talked first, made others feel welcome without even trying. She was friendly, easy to be around, someone who didn't need attention to make an impact, and she was hard-working. Even as a teenager, Amber wasn't the type to sit still or wait for things to come to her. She pushed herself. She wanted to build something real, something she could be proud of. That drive showed up early, in school, on teams, in the way she treated people. Long before the tragedy, long before the headlines, she was a daughter, a friend, and a young woman carving out her path in a small Minnesota town, a path filled with promise and plans she never got the chance to finish. As Amber moved into her high school years, one place seemed to capture her spirit more than anywhere else: the basketball court. She wasn't the loudest player, she wasn't the show-off, but once she stepped behind that three-point line, she became someone you paid attention to. People who knew her say she never hesitated to take the shot, fearless, confident, calm under pressure. Her coach remembered her as the kind of player who didn't back down, no matter who stood in front of her. And her friends say that same drive showed up off the court too. Competitive, sure, but always kind. The girl who pushed herself hard but never pushed others down to get ahead. In a small Minnesota gym, surrounded by squeaking shoes and echoing whistles, Amber found a rhythm, a mix of hard work, heart, and quiet determination, traits that would stay with her long after graduation. She learned how to show up, how to focus, how to give everything she had, and those lessons would shape the next part of her life. After high school, while some people her age were still trying to figure out what they wanted, Amber already knew. She wanted a trade. She wanted a skill she could build a future on. And welding was it. There was something about the work, the precision, the focus, the pride of creating something with her own hands that clicked for her almost instantly. At Alexandria Technical and Community College, she put in the hours, learned the craft, and pushed herself the same way she once did on the court. By 2024, she graduated, a real accomplishment for someone so young, but not surprising to the people who knew her best. Amber wasn't chasing attention. She was chasing a life she could be proud of. She found something she loved, and she was good at it. Good enough to earn a job as a welder and take her first real steps into adulthood, excited, hopeful, and ready for what came next. It's heartbreaking to look back now, knowing how hard she worked for that future, and how quickly it was taken from her. To understand the weight of what happened, you have to understand where it happened. Cokato, Minnesota, a small community where people know their neighbors, where families stay for generations, and where the loudest sound most mornings is a tractor on a back road or a pickup rolling past the diner. It's the kind of place built on simple routines: early coffee, long workdays, kids riding bikes on quiet streets, a mix of farms, local shops, and factories that keep the town moving. Here, people grow up together, they work together, they talk about the weather, the crops, the high school games, and they trust that tomorrow will look a lot like today. Nothing about this town prepares you for violence. Nothing prepares a place like this for a crime that feels so sudden and so senseless. But on November 11th, everything changed, and a community built on calm and familiarity was forced to face a story darker than anything it had ever seen.
Amber worked at Advanced Process Technologies, APT, a well-known manufacturer in the area. They build equipment for food and dairy processing, steel, machinery, heavy tools, real industrial work done by people who take pride in it. Inside the building, the days start early. The first shift kicks in before the sun rises. Welders step into their booths. Grinders buzz. Metal echoes through the floor. It's the kind of job where everyone depends on everyone else, where teamwork and safety matter every single minute. Factories like APT follow strict routines, safety training, protective gear, clear rules about equipment and heavy tools. In places like this, people trust the guidelines. They trust their coworkers. They trust that danger only comes from the machines, not from the person standing a few feet away. For Amber, it was a solid job, steady, honest work, the kind of role that builds a future. She wasn't just clocking in, she was building the life she had worked so hard for. But even in a place built on structure and routine, one person with bad intentions can break everything. And that's exactly what investigators say happened here. Every morning, Amber showed up ready to work, focused, steady, doing what she loved. Her workstation was just one corner of a big, busy building. Nothing unusual, nothing risky, nothing that suggested danger. But among the people working beside her was a coworker who, according to investigators, had already made a deadly decision. A man who walked the same halls, used the same tools, and passed her every day, quietly carrying a plan no one else could see. Amber came in expecting a normal shift, but he came in with something else entirely, and in the next moments of this story, everything breaks. On that morning, Amber walked into APT the same way she always did, early, focused, ready to work. She took her place at her workstation, settled into her routine, and started another day in a job she was proud to have. Inside a factory like this, people come from all walks of life. Younger workers, older workers, different backgrounds, different stories, all sharing the same space, the same tools, the same long shifts. Most days it works. Most days, everyone just does their job and goes home. But factories aren't just machines and metal, they're people. And sometimes, people carry things you can't see, frustrations, grudges, tension that never gets said out loud. While Amber was working that morning, doing nothing unusual, nothing risky, one of her coworkers was moving through the building with a very different mindset. A 40-year-old man who, according to investigators, openly admitted he didn't like her and says he had been thinking about killing her for some time. Amber had no reason to expect danger, but he did, and what happened next would change everything. To understand how this tragedy unfolded, we have to look at the man at the center of it, the man investigators say carried out the attack. His name is David Bruce Delong, 40 years old, from Watkins, Minnesota, a small community not far from where Amber lived and worked. He was employed at APT, the same factory where Amber worked her morning shifts. Day after day, he walked the same halls, used the same tools, followed the same schedule as everyone else. Nothing about his presence stood out to the outside world. But workplaces aren't just about the tasks, they're about the people inside them, and people bring more than their lunchboxes and work gloves to a job. They bring stress, they bring frustration, they bring whatever is happening in their life, good or bad. In any industrial setting, especially one built on long hours and hard physical labor, tension can build quietly. Resentment can form, and sometimes people misread simple things, a comment, a look, even silence, and turn them into something bigger in their minds. What we know is this: Delong was there every day, working alongside coworkers who had no idea what he might have been carrying on the inside, or where those feelings would eventually lead. According to reports, the picture of Delong painted by people who knew him wasn't loud or dramatic. He wasn't a man who drew attention. Coworkers described him as someone who mostly kept to himself, a man who showed up, did his job, and stayed quiet. But quiet doesn't always mean calm. Quiet can hide frustration. Quiet can mask resentment. In many workplaces, especially factories, small interactions can take on a life of their own. A simple disagreement, a misunderstanding, even a single look, something most people would forget in seconds, can stick with someone who's already feeling angry or isolated. Investigators say Delong claimed that a bad look he believed Amber gave him had bothered him. A small moment, something countless workers brush off every day. But in his case, it appears to have grown into something far more toxic. According to the case file, he told authorities he didn't like her and had thought about killing her for some time. Not because of a fight, not because of a heated argument, but because of something small, something most people wouldn't even remember. It shows how fragile workplace dynamics can be, and how dangerous someone can become when they hold on to a feeling long enough for it to twist into something dark. According to investigators, DeLong claimed that all of this, everything that followed, began with what he called a bad look, a moment so small, most people wouldn't even notice it. A glance, a split second, something that should have meant nothing. But for him it didn't fade, it stuck, it grew. He told authorities he didn't like Amber, and that he had been planning to kill her for some time, not because of words exchanged, not because of a conflict, but because of that one moment he interpreted in the worst way possible. It shows how dangerous resentment can become when someone holds on to it long enough. How a tiny spark, something most people forget instantly, can turn into something dark in the mind of someone already carrying anger, frustration, or a sense of being wronged. And the truth is, in workplaces everywhere, warning signs can be quiet, subtle, easy to miss. People don't always shout their intentions. Sometimes they hide them behind routine until it's too late. And on that morning inside APT, it was far too late. Every workplace has tension. It doesn't matter if it's an office, a construction site, or a factory floor. People come from different backgrounds, different generations, different ways of seeing the world. And when you combine all of that under one roof, conflicts can happen. Sometimes it's simple miscommunication. Someone hears something the wrong way. Sometimes it's a moment of perceived disrespect, even when no harm was meant. And sometimes it's just the natural friction between older workers and younger workers, each with their own pace, their own habits, their own expectations. Experts in workplace behavior warn that these small interactions can grow in someone who's already feeling stressed or isolated. A workplace psychologist might say that when a person feels overlooked or resentful, even tiny moments can feel personal, almost like an attack. And if no one notices the change, the frustration can build quietly, out of sight. Most of the time these moments fade, but every once in a while they don't. There are warning signs that workplaces are taught to look for, signs that someone may be reaching a breaking point, someone expressing extreme anger toward a coworker, someone talking about revenge, someone suddenly withdrawing from everyone around them, sudden changes in behavior, mood swings, isolation, bitterness, things that stand out when you look back, even if they didn't seem urgent at the time. These are general red flags, not proof, not certainty, but signs that something inside a person may be shifting in a dangerous direction. And the hardest part is this: many people hide these signs well. They show up, do their job, keep their thoughts to themselves, right up until the moment they act. There's still a lot we don't know about what happened inside APT before the attack. Public records don't show detailed HR files. They don't show complaints or official reports between Amber and DeLong. They don't reveal every conversation, every moment, or every feeling that passed between the people inside that building. So we can talk about patterns, we can talk about risks, we can talk about what experts have seen in other cases, but we cannot claim what isn't known. What we do know, what begins to come into focus, starts at 6 a.m. on November 11th, the moment when routine turned into danger, and a plan investigators say had been building for some time, finally took shape. The night before the attack, Amber lived a night like so many others. Nothing dramatic, nothing unusual, just the quiet rhythm of someone getting ready for another early shift. Maybe she was at home, maybe she was with family, maybe she was laying out her work clothes, or checking the time, knowing she had to wake up before sunrise. It was the kind of evening a young woman has when she's building her future. Steady, simple, hopeful. There was no warning, no sign of danger, no clue that the next morning would be anything other than another day at work. Amber went to bed with plans for tomorrow, unaware that tomorrow had its own plans for her. Just before sunrise, Cokato begins to stir. Trucks roll into the parking lot at APT. Workers step out, coffee in hand, ready for a long shift. Inside the building, the day starts like it always does. Clock-ins beep, tools are checked out, welding arcs snap to life in the dim morning light. Amber takes her place at her workstation, doing exactly what she did every other morning. Focused, prepared, completely unaware of the danger moving quietly through the same building. Because somewhere on that factory floor is a coworker investigators say had already made a deadly choice. A man who admits he didn't like her and says he had been thinking about killing her for some time. It is now 6 a.m., and the routine shift Amber thought she was starting is about to take a turn no one could have imagined. Security footage shows DeLong leaving his workstation. No rush, no struggle, just a man moving with purpose across the factory floor. He walks toward Amber's area, a place she stood every morning, focused on her work. In the footage he pauses, puts on gloves, and reaches for a sledgehammer stored nearby. Nothing about his movements looks confused or accidental. It looks planned, deliberate, a choice he had already decided to carry out. And in that moment, the routine of a normal shift ends, and something far darker begins. The footage doesn't show every detail, but investigators were able to piece together the sequence. The first swing is horizontal, consistent with Amber still standing. Then there are more swings, downward, targeted, 4 in total after she falls. It happens fast, too fast for anyone nearby to stop it, too fast for Amber to understand what was happening, or why someone she worked beside would do this to her. It is the moment investigators say reveals the premeditation, the planning he admitted to, carried out in seconds. When the attack is over, the factory is left in stunned silence. Co-workers find Amber on the ground, gravely injured, with no time to save her. Someone calls 911, their voice shaking, desperate for help that cannot come fast enough. Paramedics and deputies arrive, but despite every effort, Amber is pronounced dead at the scene. A normal workday has become a crime scene. A young woman's life has been stolen, and the investigation into what happened and why begins right there, on the floor of the place she came to earn an honest living. Right after the attack, as co-workers tried to understand what they were seeing, DeLong reportedly walked up to one of them with a statement that froze the room. He said, "I hit her with your hammer. She is by your toolbox. She is gone." Imagine hearing that from someone you work beside. Not shouted, not panicked, just said like it was nothing. A moment that would stay with his co-workers forever. The shock was immediate. Fear, confusion, disbelief. People who had started their day expecting a normal shift were suddenly standing in the middle of something they could barely process. In that instant, everyone in that building knew the situation was far beyond anything they could handle, and they knew law enforcement needed to take over. The Wright County Sheriff's Office arrived quickly, moving with urgency and precision. The first deputies secured the building, making sure no one else was in danger. Employees were separated so their statements wouldn't influence one another, giving investigators the clearest picture of what happened. Inside the factory, officers moved through the aisles of equipment and steel, following procedure step by step. They located DeLong and detained him without incident. He was taken into custody while detectives worked to protect the scene, document every detail, and begin building the timeline of events. What started as a normal morning shift had become a full-scale homicide investigation. The attack had ended, but the work of understanding it had only just begun. Inside the factory, investigators began the careful work of documenting the scene. The sledgehammer used in the attack was recovered near Amber's workstation. Blood patterns marked the area where everything happened. And the security footage, the same footage that captured DeLong's movements before the attack, became one of the key pieces of evidence in the case. Investigators followed standard procedure. They photographed every angle. They measured distances, marked locations, and collected each item with care. Every tool, every stain, every piece of footage had to be preserved exactly as it was found. In a case like this, the details matter, and the team on scene made sure nothing was missed. Despite the efforts of first responders, Amber's injuries were too severe. Her cause of death was identified as blunt force trauma to the head, with massive blood loss. A young woman who had shown up for another morning shift was gone before help could reach her. And while investigators continued their work inside the factory, a knock on a door miles away was about to change a family forever. While investigators worked inside the factory, another moment was unfolding miles away, one of the hardest moments any family can face. Officers approached the Czech home with the news no one is ever ready to hear. A quiet knock, a heavy pause, and then the words that would break a family's world apart. There is no way to soften news like this. No way to prepare a parent, a sibling, or anyone who loved Amber for what they were being told. A young woman who left for work that morning would not be coming home. The news moved through Cokato and the surrounding communities quickly, and the reaction was immediate and heartbroken. Friends described Amber as kind, hard-working, and full of potential. Her former coach remembered her determination, her steady presence, and the way she carried herself both on and off the court. Obituary messages spoke of a young woman who brought light to the people around her, someone loved deeply and missed even more. Soon, a small town tried to honor a life taken far too soon. Flowers were left outside the workplace gates. Candles were lit at vigils. Online tributes poured in from people who knew Amber, and from those who simply couldn't believe something so violent had happened in their community. It was clear this wasn't just a workplace tragedy. It was a loss that shook everyone who knew her, and many who didn't. After his arrest, DeLong was brought into an interview room, a plain space where investigators do their hardest work. He was read his rights, told he had the right to remain silent, the right to an attorney, the right to choose what he shared. But according to investigators, he didn't hold back. He told them he didn't like Amber. He said it plainly. He also said he had been thinking about killing her, not for minutes or hours, but for some time. No argument, no confrontation, just a decision he claims he carried with him until the morning he acted on it. In that room, room, investigators listened to a man explain a motive that made almost no sense to anyone but him. DeLong's reported explanation came down to three things. First, he said he didn't like her. Second, he claimed a bad look from Amber had bothered him, a moment so small most people wouldn't remember it. And third, he admitted he had planned the attack for some time. Experts in violent behavior often warn about this pattern, when a minor moment becomes a personal insult in the mind of someone already carrying anger or resentment. The small spark becomes something bigger, something they feed with their own thoughts until it turns into a grievance they can't let go of. And in the most extreme cases, that grievance turns into action. That's what investigators were hearing inside the interview room. A man who took a tiny moment and let it grow into something deadly. And as his confession unfolded, the full weight of what happened and why began to take shape. After Amber was taken from the factory, an autopsy confirmed what investigators already feared. Her cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head, with injuries consistent with multiple blows. The findings matched the evidence recovered at the scene, including the sledgehammer DeLong had used during the attack. The medical report was clinical, factual, and devastating. It laid out the reality of what happened in clear terms, the kind of clarity no family ever wants, but every investigation needs. Forensic work then connected the physical evidence to the crime itself. The sledgehammer had blood on it, matching the injuries Amber suffered. Investigators documented everything carefully: fingerprints, DNA, and the exact position of each item inside the factory. From the moment the hammer was recovered, it followed a strict chain of custody, logged and secured to ensure nothing could be questioned later. Piece by piece, the evidence built a clear picture of what had happened and who was responsible.
The tools available to every defendant, regardless of the crime. At the same time, the prosecution enters this case with several factors working strongly in their favor. The security footage provides a clear sequence of events, showing DeLong leaving his station, walking toward Amber, and arming himself before the attack. That footage is powerful evidence of intent. Then there is DeLong's own reported confession, where investigators say he admitted he didn't like Amber and had been thinking about killing her. Statements like that, if accepted in court, can carry tremendous weight. Physical evidence also ties the scene together: the sledgehammer, the blood patterns, and the documentation collected immediately after the attack. All of this shapes the decisions prosecutors must make. Does the evidence support keeping the charge at second-degree intentional murder, or does it show enough planning to seek a first-degree premeditated charge, the most serious under Minnesota law? The next steps in the case depend on how these pieces fit together, and on how the law interprets DeLong's actions before and during the attack. In the days that followed, APT released a statement expressing heartbreak over Amber's death and their full cooperation with law enforcement. Production was temporarily shut down as co-workers tried to process what had happened inside their workplace. Support services were offered to employees and to Amber's family, a small attempt to help a community shaken by something they never imagined confronting. It was clear the entire company felt the weight of this tragedy. When violence erupts in a place that's supposed to be safe, it forces every workplace to stop and think. It's a reminder of how important it is for people to report concerning behavior, even if it seems small at the time. It highlights the need for clear policies, real communication, and channels where workers can speak up before problems grow. Training, early warning signs, and strong security protocols are not just checkboxes, they are lifelines that can prevent a tragedy. Factories, offices, and job sites everywhere face the same truth: safety is not automatic. It has to be built, strengthened, and protected every single day. But at the center of all this, the reports, the evidence, the legal process, is Amber. A young woman who had dreams, talent, and a future she was working hard to build. She loved welding. She found pride in her skill. She wanted to make something of her life, to stand on her own, and she was well on her way. Her family's grief speaks to how deeply she was loved. Her coach remembered her determination, her quiet strength, and the spark she brought to the court. Friends talked about the kindness she carried with her, the kind of kindness people don't forget. Amber was more than a headline, more than a victim. She was a daughter, a friend, a teammate, a skilled young woman building her future one weld, one shift, one day at a time. And that is how she deserves to be remembered. What happened to Amber was not random. It was not a chance encounter with a stranger. It was an attack reportedly planned by someone she worked beside, someone she saw every day on the factory floor. It is a reminder of how fragile our routines can be, how quickly the familiar can become dangerous, and how important it is to take warning signs and obsessive resentment seriously. If you ever see behavior that feels troubling or unsafe in your workplace, speak to someone, HR, a supervisor, or the proper authorities. Silence can give dangerous thoughts room to grow. Amber's life mattered, her future mattered, and her story should stand as a call to awareness, compassion, and protection in every workplace. In memory of Amber Czech.